Welcome back. What's going on, family, friends, Mishpachah, right? Kingdom builders, road trippers. Welcome back to the road trip. All right. Shalom and shalom. Peace and blessings to each and every single one of you, right? Peace and blessings to your homes, your dwelling places, your children, your loved ones, your friends, and your pets. All that good stuff that you need in your life. Isn't that right, fam? That's right. Correct. All right, man. All praises to the Most High. All praises to Yahweh. Glory to Yahweh Shai. Honors to the Ruach. And my love and my respect to you. Thanks for being here. All right, on this Shabbat Eve. All right. How was your week? How was your week, everyone? All right. Was it long? Was it successful? Hopefully it was, right? But now it's over with, right? And now we're at the end of it. Now you get a chance to kind of tie up some loose ends, get that nice meal that you were waiting on this evening, and praise the Most High, right? For another week up and another week down. That's correct. So where we at? Where are we, right? We're back in the book of Flavius Josephus, the works of Josephus. That's correct. All right. And this is the Jewish Antiquities. We're still in that. Looking at this, we finished up last night or early this morning on chapter 3 and notes. And so we're going to go ahead and read chapter 4. There are no notes on chapter 4. And we're just going to go ahead, I think, and read the rest of the... Yeah, we're going to read 4, 5, and maybe 6. Maybe. There's notes at the end of 6. All right, yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, let's just get ready to start on this. If you have these scrolls, follow along with me. If not, then I'll try to read the best that I can. All right. So no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. Chapter 4, which starts off reading concerning the Tower of Babylon and the confusion of tongues. All right, let's begin. Chapter 4, Section 1, and it reads, Now the sons of Noah were 3, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, born 100 years before the deluge. These first of all descended from the mountains into the plains, and fixed their habitation there, and persuaded others who were greatly afraid of the lower grounds on account of the flood, and so were very loath to come down from the higher places to venture to follow their examples. Now the plain in which they first dwelt was called Shinar. Yahweh also commanded them to send colonies abroad for the thorough peopling of the earth, that they might not raise rebellious among themselves, but might cultivate a great part of the earth, and enjoy its fruits after a plentiful manner. And they were so ill instructed that they did not obey Yahweh, for which reason they fell into calamities, and were made sensible by experience of what sin they had been guilty. For when they flourished with numerous children, Yahweh admonished them again to send out colonies, but they, imagining the prosperity they enjoyed was not derived from the favor of Yahweh, but supposing that their own power was the proper cause of the plentiful condition they were in, did not obey him. They added to this their disobedience to the divine will, the suspicion that they were therefore ordered to send out separate colonies, that being divided asunder, they might the more easily be oppressed. That's the end of section 1. All right. So you see, instead of being fruitful and multiply and spreading out, they wanted to stay all in one spot. Nobody wanted to start over, right? They got, comfortable where they got, where they were all bunched up together. Right? They were being disobedient. That's the end of that. Section 2. Now, it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of Yahweh. He was the grandson of Ham and son of Noah, a bold man and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to Yahweh, as if it was through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of Yahweh, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his power. He also said he would be revenged on Yahweh if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on Yahweh for destroying the forefathers. Wow. That's the end of section 2. Section 3. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to Yahweh. And they built a tower, neither sparing any pains, nor being in any degree negligent about the work. And by reason of the multitude of hands employed in it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built, that thereby its great height seemed at first to be less than it really was. It was built of burnt brick, cemented together with mortar made of bitumen, that it might not be liable to admit water. When Yahweh saw that they acted so madly, he did not resolve to destroy them utterly, since they were not grown wiser by the destruction of the former sinners. But he caused a disturbance among them by producing in them diverse languages, and causing that through the multitude of those languages they should not be able to understand one another. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon, because of the confusion of the language, which they readily understood before. For the Hebrews mean by the word Babel confusion. The Sibyl also makes mention of this tower and of the confusion of the language when she says thus: when all men were of one language, some of them built a high tower as if they would thereby ascend up to heaven. But the gods sent storms of winds and overthrew the tower and gave every one his peculiar language. And for this reason it was that the city was called Babylon. But as to the plain of Shinar, in the country of Babylonia, Hestius mentions it, when he says thus: such as the priests as were saved took the sacred vessels of Jupiter and Nilias and came to Shinar of Babylonia. That's the end of chapter 4, okay? Cool. And starting on chapter 5 reads, not what it reads, but the title of it. After what manner the posterity of Noah sent out colonies and inhabited the whole earth. All right, chapter 5. All right, let's begin. Section 1, and it reads: After this, they were dispersed abroad and on account of their languages, and went out by the colonies everywhere. And each colony took possession of that land which they light upon, and unto which Yahweh led them, so that the whole continent was filled with them, Salake, both the inland and the maritime countries. There were some also who passed over the sea in ships, and inhabited the islands. And some of those nations do still retain the names which were given them by their first founders. But some have lost them also, and some have only admitted certain changes in them, that they might be the more intelligible to the inhabitants. And they were the Greeks who became the authors of such mutations. Right? For when in after ages they grew potent, they claimed to themselves the glory of antiquity, giving names to the nations that sounded well in Greek, that they might be better understood among themselves, and setting agreeable forms of government over them, as if they were a people derived from themselves. That's the end of chapter 5. All right. And we're going to go ahead and read chapter 6. Chapter 6 title, the kind of intro was about how every nation was denominated from the first inhabitants. All right. So chapter 6, section 1, and it reads, Now they were the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations of those that first seized upon them. Japheth the son of Noah had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountains Taurus and Amanus, they proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tanis, and along Europe to Cadiz, and settling themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before. They called the nations by their own names. For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now called Galatians, the Gauls, right? But were then called Gomerites. Magog founded those that from him were named Magogites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians. Now as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japheth, from Madai came the Medians, who are called Medes by the Greeks. But from Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived. Thobel, or Tubal, founded the Thobelites, who are now called the Iberes, and the Masaukinai were founded by Mosok, Meshik. Now they are Cappadocians, Cappadocians. There is also a mark of their ancient denomination still to be shown, for there is even now among them a city called Mazaka, which may inform those that are able to understand that so was the entire nation once called Tyros, also called those who he ruled over Thracians, but the Greeks changed the name to Thracians. And so many were the countries that had the children of Japheth for their inhabitants. Of these 3 sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz founded the Ashkenazis, right, who are now called by the Greeks the Reganians. So did Rephath found the Rephaeans, now called Paphlagonians, and through Gama, Togarmo, the Trugamaeans, who, as the Greeks resolved, were named Phrygians of the 3 sons of Javan. Also the son of Japheth, Elisha, gave name to Elysians, who were the subjects. They are now the Aeolians. Tharas, Tarshish, to the Tarsians. For so was Cilicia of old called, the sign of which is this, that the noblest city they have, and the metropolis also, is Tarsus, the Tau being the change put for the Theta. Sethimas, Kittim, possessed the island Sethima. It is now called Cyprus, and from that it is that all islands and the greatest part of the sea coast are named Sethim by the Hebrews, and the one city there is, Cyprus, that has been able to preserve its domination and denomination. It has been called Citius by those who use the language of the Greeks, and has not by the use of that dialect escaped the name of Sethim. And so many nations have the children and grandchildren of Japheth possessed. Now, when I have premised something, which perhaps the Greeks do not know, I will return and explain what I have omitted. For such names are pronounced hereafter the manner of the Greeks, to please my readers. For our own country language does not so pronounce them, but the names in all cases are of one and the same ending. For the name we here pronounce Noes is here Noah, and in every case retains the same termination. End of section 1. Wow. Section 2. The children of Ham possessed the land of Syria and Ammonites, and the mountains of Libanus, seizing upon all that was on the seacoast, and as far as the ocean, and keeping it as their own. Some indeed of its names are utterly vanished away, others of them being changed, and other sound given them, are hardly to be discovered. Yet a few there are which have kept their denominations entire. For of the 4 sons of Ham, time has not at all hurt their names of Chus or Cush, for the Ethiopians, over whom he reigned, are even at this day, both by themselves and by all men in Asia, called Cushites, or Chushites. The memory also of the Mezarites is preserved in their name, for all we who inhabit the country of Judea, called Mizraim, Mester, and the Egyptians Mesraeans. Phut, or Put, also was the founder of Libya, and called the inhabitants Phutites. From himself there is also a river in the country of Moors, which bears that name. Thus it is that we may see the greatest part of the Grecian historiographers mention the river and the adjoining country by the appellation of Phut. But the name it has now has been by change given it from one of the sons of Mizraim, who was called Libyos, or Libis. We will inform you presently what has been the occasion why it has been called Africa also. Canaan, the 4th son of Ham, inhabited the country now called Judea, and called it from its own name Canaan. The children of these 4 were these: Sabas, or Sabex, who founded the Sabians; Levelas, or Havilah, who founded the Avelians, who are called Getulai; Sabathes, or Sabta, founded the Sabathians. They are now called the Greeks Astroborens. Sabactus, or Sabeka, settled the Sabecatans, and Ragmus, or Rama, the Ragmians, and he had 2 sons, the one of whom, Judadas, settled the Judadeans, a nation of the western Ethiopians, and left them his name, as did Sabas, or Saba, to the Sabians. But Nimrod, the son of Cush, stayed and tyrannized at Babylon, as we have already informed you. Now all the children of Mizraim, being 8 in number, possessed the country from Gaza to Egypt, though it retained the name of the one only, the Philistium, for the Greeks call part of that country Palestine. As for the rest, Ludicium and Enamim and Labim, who alone inhabited in Libya, and called the country for himself Nadim and Phethrosim, and Chesloim and Sephthorim. We know nothing of them besides their names, for the Ethiopic war, which we shall describe hereafter, was the cause that those cities were overthrown. The sons of Canaan were these: Sidon, who also built a city of the same name. It is called by the Greeks Sidon. Amathus inhabited the Amathene, which is even now called Amath by the inhabitants, although the Macedonians named it Epiphania from one of its posterity. Arudues possessed the island Aradus. Arukas possessed Arche, which is in Labanus, or Labanus. But for the 7 others, Chatius, Jebuseus, Amoreus, Gergesus, Eudeus, Senius, Samareus, we have nothing in the sacred books but their names. For the Hebrew overthrew their cities, and their calamities came upon them on the occasion following. That's the end of section 2. My goodness, have mercy on me. Hey, family and friends, these names are beating me up, okay? Have some patience. That's the end of section 2. Section 3, and it reads: Noah, when after the deluge the earth was resettled in its former condition, set about its cultivation. And when he had planted it with vines, and when the fruit was ripe, and he had gathered the grapes in their season, and the wine was ready for use, he offered sacrifice and feasted. And being drunk, he fell asleep and lay naked in an unseemly manner. When his youngest son saw this, he came laughing and showed him to his brothers. But they covered their father's nakedness. And when Noah was made sensible of what had been done, he prayed for posterity to his other sons. But for Ham, he did not curse him, by reason of his nearness in blood, but cursed his prosperity. And when the rest of them escaped that curse, Yahweh inflicted it on the children of Canaan. But as to these matters, we shall speak more hereafter. That's the end of section 3. All right. Hallelujah. Section 4. And in between section 4 and section 5, it kind of has a breakdown that talks kind of about like some of the Hellenistic priests and things like that were taking place during the whole, like, I guess you would call it a Greek Reformation, when they were kind of taking over the Yahudim and trying to convert them into, their church and all kind of the pagan, all that kind of stuff. But it kind of goes into that, and we're going to read that. But first, let's get section 4. Section 4, and it reads: Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons who inhabited the land that began at Euphrates and reached to the Indian Ocean. For Elam left behind him the Elamites, the ancestors of the Persians. Ashur lived at the city Nineveh, and named his subjects Assyrians, who became the most fortunate nation beyond others. Arphaxad named the Arphaxidites, who are now called Chaldeans. Aram had the Aramites, which the Greeks called Assyrians. As Lud founded the Laudites, which are now called the Lydians. Of the 4 sons of Aram, Uz founded Trachonitis and Damascus in Syria. This country lies between Palestine and Kol Syria. Kol Syria. All right, let's see. Hul founded Armenia and gathered the Bactrians and Mesek, the Messenians. It is now called Charax. Salah, or Shelah, was the son of Arphaxad, and his son was Eber, from whom they originally called the Yahudim Hebrews. Eber begot Joktan and Peleg. He was called Peleg because he was born at the dispersion of the nations to the several countries, for Peleg among the Hebrews signifies division. Now Joktan, one of the sons of Eber, had these sons: Almodad, Shelef, Hazarmaveth, Jera, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimiel, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. These inhabited from Kothan, an Indian river, and in part of Asia adjoining to it. And this shall suffice concerning the sons of Shem. That's the end of section 4. All right, let's get section 5 before we read the notes and get that other part. All right, section 5, and it reads: I will now treat of the Hebrews, the son of Peleg, whose father was Eber, was Reu, whose son was Serug, to whom was born Nahor. His son was Terah, who was the father of Abraham, who accordingly was the 10th from Noah, and was born in the 292nd year after the deluge. For Terah begat Abram, in his 70th year. Nahor begat Haran when he was 120 years old. Nahor was born to Serug in his 132nd year. Reu had Serug at 130. At the same age also Peleg had Reu. Heber begat Phaleg in his 134th year. He himself began being begotten by Shelah when he was 130 years old, whom Arphaxad had for his son at the 135th year of his age. Arphaxad was the son of Shem, and born 12 years after the deluge. Now Abram had 2 brothers, Nahor and Haran. Of these Haran left a son, Lot, as also Sarai and Milcah his daughters, and died among the Chaldeans in the city of the Chaldeans, called Ur. and his monument is shown to this day. These married their nieces. Nahor married Milcah, and Abram married Sarai. Now, Terah hating Chaldea on account of his mourning for Haran, they all removed to Haran of Mesopotamia, where Terah died, and was buried when he had lived to be 205 years old. For the life of man was already by degrees diminished, and became shorter than before until the birth of Moshe, after whom the term of human life was 120 years, Yahweh determining it to the length that Moshe happened to live. Now, Nahor had 8 sons by Milcah, Uz and Buz and Kemuel and Kesed, Hazel, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. These were all the genuine sons of Nahor, for Teba and Gaham and Tehash and Makkah were born of Reumah, his concubine. But Bethuel had a daughter, Rebekah, and a son, Laban. That's the end of section 5. All right. All right, a couple notes right here. One of the notes was called The Creation and the Flood. And it reads right here. It says, Josephus is proud of the fact that his great historical source, Moshe, was born 2,000 years ago, thus circuit c. 1900 BC, since Josephus wrote just before AD 100. In fact, this is an impossible dating for Moshe's birth, since even the earliest chronologies of the Exodus led by Moshe place it 500 years later. Inflated numbers, however, are a common malaise among ancient historians, and Josephus probably intended to demonstrate the remarkable antiquity of the Hebrews here in comparison to a Rome which, though in command of the Mediterranean, was a mere 7 or 8 centuries old. Josephus may perhaps be forgiven a heroic gaffe of his nature, since he was neither present at the creation nor at the birth of Moshe. In general, the following rule applies. The closer the historical event approaches his own day, the more accurate his information becomes. From the intertestamental period onward through the close of Antiquities in 73 AD, his record is at its best. In the creation account, Josephus's addendum to Genesis that Adam was formed from the red earth is an example of many such embellishments to follow, which he derived from rabbinical traditions and other extra-biblical sources. Scholars remain divided to this day on whether Adam stems from the Hebrew Adom, red, from the Edom is derived, or Adama, ground or earth, as in Genesis 2:7. As to Eve, her name Hava in Hebrew means life or living, rather than Josephus's mother of all living. A latitude regarding etymologies he will exhibit also elsewhere. Sensitive to the possibility that his non-Jewish readership might doubt the account of Noah and the flood, Josephus cites supporting evidence from such other historians of antiquity as Berosus, which is cited as 300 BC. The Hellenistic priest who wrote a history of Babylon, his contemporary Manetho, who did the same for Mizraim, and Nicolaos of Damascus, the bibliographer the friend of Herod the Great, who authored a universal history, now lost, on which Josephus heavily relied. He also cites these sources to collaborate and to corroborate the extraordinary long lifespans of the earliest biblical personalities, and further attributes such as phenomenon to divine favor, as well as a diet more conducive to longevity. Okay? All right. And then note number 1 reads, one observation ought not here to be neglected with regard to that Ethiopic war, which Moses, or Moshe, as general of the Egyptians, put an end to, Antiquities number 2.10, and about which our late writers seem very much unconcerned, that it was a war of that consequence as to occasion the removal or destruction of 6 or 7 nations, of the posterity of Mizraim, with their cities, which Josephus would not have said if he had not had ancient records to justify those his assertions, though those records be now all lost. That's the end of, I guess, point number 1 on the notes. And the second point that's going to finish this up says that the Yahudim were called Hebrews from this, their progenitor Eber. Our author Josephus here rightly affirms that not from Abram the Hebrew or passenger over Euphrates, as many of the moderns suppose. Shem is also called the father of all the children of Eber, or of all the Hebrews. See, Shem, of course, the father of the Hebrews. In a history long before Abram passed over Euphrates, references Genesis 10 and 21. Though it must be confessed that Genesis 14 and 13, where the original says that they told Abram the Hebrew, the Septuagint renders it the passenger parates. But this is spoken only of Abram himself, who had then lately passed over Euphrates, and is another signification of the Hebrew word taken as an appellative and not as a proper name. That's the end of chapter 6. All right, cool. And we're going to pick back up on chapter 7 on the next read, and read 7 and 8 and some more, okay? 7 and 8 starting off. That one is titled at the beginning, How Abram our forefather went out of the land of the Chaldeans and lived in the land then called Canaan, but now Judea. All right, because it was given to him. All right. So that's the end of that. Thanks for riding along with me. All right, I hope you all had a very, very great week, and I hope that you're having a relaxed evening already. All right, I can't wait to see and speak to you all again and read with you. All right, until we read again. All right, be safe out there on the roads as you travel up and down. And you know the program. It's always all praises to the Most High Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. Yeah.